Alrighty. Well, good morning, everybody. It is 5:01, and it is Thursday, April the 29th, in the year of our Lord, 2025. Hello, Rocky. Good morning. Hello. Quite a cat, you know. He makes quite the sounds. He does. He's an interesting cat with sound effects. Well, I just saw on the interwebs that Mark Carney is our prime minister. He won the election, apparently. That doesn't surprise me. I've been saying all along that he had already been appointed to the job. I don't believe the votes are really counted. My belief has been since the early 1990s. My belief has been that there's a small group of people who make these decisions, and then they have an election so that we will believe that we chose whatever we get, that we chose that. So, look, these people who run the world, this small group of elites, people like the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, people like Bill Gates, people like that, um, they you they look at us like we're cattle. And ask any farmer if he allows his cows to make important policy decisions for his farm. Ask any farmer if he's thinking of building a new barn, if he consults his cows about it first. Or if he asks his cows what crops he should plant this year. Or whatever. I think he'll tell you no, he does not do that. Anyway, they look at us like we're cattle. They're not going to allow us to make those kinds of decisions. Anyway, so I don't believe the votes were even counted. I think they just plastered some numbers up and said, there it is, and this is what you voted for, and you know. And that's why I don't vote, is because to vote would be publicly stating that I believe that my vote counts. Because why would I vote unless I believe it counts? So I don't vote anyway. Now, Pierre Poliver, who was running against him, and I know I butcher his name all the time, and I just haven't. I don't even really know the proper pronunciation of it, and I can't remember it. I've heard it pronounced properly a few times, but I never retain it. So anyway, Pierre Poliver, I call him Poliver. Everybody knows who I'm talking about, though. If he had been appointed as prime minister, he would have gotten it, but he wasn't appointed to that job. That job was already spoken for, and the position had already been given out prior to the election. Mark Carney was appointed to be prime minister prior to that, just like every other prime minister was appointed to the job prior to the election. Anyway, it's interesting too how if I'm wrong and our votes are counted, it's an interesting thing that the Canadian people actually voted against Trump. I find that amazing. Who wasn't running to be Prime Minister of Canada, and who actually wouldn't be eligible to because he's an American citizen. Just like, as a Canadian citizen, I can't run to be president. Really, I couldn't anyway for either position, because you have to have some money behind you to do it, and you have to know the right people. But assuming that I was in a position where I could afford to run and I had the right connections, you can't run to be for the head office of a foreign country, of a country that you don't have citizenship in. You don't hold any citizenship there. But still, they took the fear of Trump and they amplified it and they turned it into a big thing. And so basically, the people who voted for Carney, I wonder how many of them weren't really voting for Carney, but were voting against Trump because they have this fear of Trump, you know. And so, yeah, it's just interesting anyway. It's the dynamics of it are quite interesting, and I guess you could say the psychology of it. You know, the way people's minds work in these situations is quite interesting. Anyway, personally, I don't like Carney. I don't really like any of them, though. I think they're all puppets. So, and I think they are appointed. I don't think they're elected. And so, I don't think an election really means anything. And I have, in conversations I've had with friends, I've said, yeah, Carney's going to be the next prime minister. He's been appointed. He's already been hired. Basically, he's been appointed. I don't think that that's going to be good for us. I think it's like everything else that's happened. It's not going to be good for us as a people. It's going to be good for a few people who want to take what little we have left away from us. I think it's going to be good for them and make life even harder for us. I think it is going to be good for them. And I think that he was appointed to do that. And I think he's going to do a good job of it, too. So, yeah, we got, it'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting to see what plays out over the next few years. And one thing about it, if I'm wrong and our votes are counted, and like I say, I don't believe they are, but still, I'm not an infallible person. So if I'm wrong and the majority of Canadians actually did vote for Carney, then it is my belief that they did it because they're afraid of Trump and because of all the fear porn that has been going on the last few months about Trump. But it'll be interesting, if I'm wrong, to see what happens in 4 or 5 years when we have our next election, because Trump by that time will have served out his final term. You know, he can't go any further. He can be president for 8 years. Well, this is his second 4-year term, so this is the second half of his 8 years. And unless I'm wrong about how it works, and if I am, then anybody who is in the know about this can correct me in the comments. But as far as I know, it's 8 years total over your lifetime, not that you can't have back-to-back terms exceeding 8 years. So I believe that at the end of this term, Trump is finished, assuming that he would want to run again, and assuming that he's still alive at the end of it, and all the rest of it. You know, assuming that he hasn't been assassinated, and assuming that he hasn't died of old age, because he's not a young man, and assuming that his health holds up and he wants to run for another term. I don't believe he can. Although maybe I'm wrong. It could be that you can't have two back-to-back. You can't have more than two back-to-back terms. It might be that. It might be that if you're president for 4 years and then you're president for another 4 years, and then somebody else has to be president, and then you could run again. But I don't think that's what it is. I think that it's 8 years total in your lifetime. Yeah. So I may, like I say, I may be wrong about that. I may have that wrong, but anyway, you look at it, at the end, by the time we have our next election, which, like I say, I think the elections are all shams anyway, but let's say I'm wrong about that and our votes actually are counted. And like I say, I'm not an infallible person. I may be wrong about that. My opinion is just what makes sense to me and how I see the world and how I think things work. But let's say that I'm wrong and our votes are counted. Then it'll be interesting to see when Trump is no longer around, when Trump's no longer a factor, and Rocky, when Trump's no longer a factor, and we've already had like 4 or 5 years of Carney. It'll be interesting to see if he gets in again. That's all. If people will vote for him after we've had 4 or 5 years of him and whatever he will do. Personally, I don't think what he's going to do is going to be good for us. I think we're going to suffer a great deal in this country under Carney. But again, maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I see it. Like I say, we'll know more in 4 or 5 years. Whether I'm right or wrong will be, it'll be proven one way or another. Maybe this video I'm making now won't age very well for me. But I don't think that's the case, obviously, or I wouldn't be making it. But maybe it won't. Maybe it'll turn out in 4 or 5 years, Carney will have done a great job. We'll all be better off. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he's going to do a great job working for the globalist elites, but I don't think he's going to do a great job working for the people. I really don't. I'm rubbing Rocky's belly here. And I don't think he was hired by the people to work for the people. I think he was appointed by the globalist elites to work for them, just like all the others before him. So, anyway, it'll be interesting, though, to see in 4 or 5 years where we're at. And it'll also be interesting to see if I'm wrong and our votes are counted. It'll be interesting to see what'll happen when the fear of Trump is no longer a factor, because Trump is finished as president in the United States and ineligible to run again. Now, perhaps somebody else like Trump will run down there, will be president down there after Trump. Perhaps one of Trump's sons will run, or his daughter or something. Who knows? I mean, one of his kids will run. I just don't know. I mean, in which case, then again, they can capitalize on the fear of the Trump name. And even if Carney does a really bad job, he can get in again. Assuming that our votes are counted. Because they can play off on the fear of Trump. They can say, well, now we got to be afraid of this other Trump, We got to be afraid of Barron Trump or whatever. We don't want, because Barron Trump is now president, and we got to be afraid of him, or who knows, Maybe that's what they'll do. I don't know. And again, that's assuming that I'm incorrect and that our votes are counted and that it isn't the way I think it is. But regardless of whether I'm right or wrong, it's going to be an interesting time. It's going to be an interesting 4 or 5 years in history, that's for sure. Like I say, I think things are going to get a lot tougher for the average person. And Carney has already promised that, because he says that it's worth it to make things tougher for the average person to impose his environmental agenda and all that stuff. So, yeah, day-to-day life will get harder. Even Carney himself has said that he intends to make that the case. Now, he says he believes he's doing it for the greater good. I don't believe a word of it, but that is what he says anyway. So, but yeah, he's made it clear life is going to be a lot more expensive and a lot harder for the average person under his government. So, And he's also made it clear that he wants to revive these censorship laws that got quashed. These laws that didn't pass, like Bill C-63, he wants to bring them back and run them through again and get them passed. So that while all this is happening, if we complain about it, if we openly and publicly complain about it, or if we complain about, if we say anything negative about the LGBTQ thing or the trans thing or whatever that we got going on here, if we say that we think tampons in men's washrooms is silly, for example, and somebody's upset by that we could be hauled before a tribunal, fined tens of thousands of dollars and jailed, and even potentially jailed for life, as if we had murdered somebody because we hurt somebody's feelings with our speech. So he has said that he wants to get those laws passed. So, and also they're retroactive. So like the video I'm making now, the statements I just make get me jailed, possibly for life, because they're going to go back through social media and they're going to look for people like me, basically, that they can throw into jail. So for things that we're saying now before that law is even a law. So I mean, yeah, there you go. That's what we've got. That's what's been appointed. That's who the elites have hired to rule over us anyway, in my opinion. Or it's who Canadians have voted to rule over them. I don't believe that's the case, but it possibly is, because like I say, I'm not an infallible person. So my opinion is just that. It's my opinion. It's what makes sense to me. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see what happens. All I can tell you is it's going to be interesting, as I've said a few times already. There's an old curse. It's an old, I believe it's a Chinese curse. It might be a Japanese curse, though. I don't know. But it's from Asia. And the curse is, if somebody might say to another person, "May you live in interesting times." Now, on the surface of it, that sounds like a blessing. It sounds like somebody's wishing you well, but they're not. Because historically interesting times are always hard times. The times that are the most interesting from an historical point of view are hard times. So if somebody in Asia says to you, "May you live in interesting times," they're not wishing you well, they're cursing you. FYI, you're being cursed. If somebody says that to you in Asia, if they say that to you, they're cursing you. May you live in interesting times. It sounds nice, but it isn't, They're wishing that you live in times of hardship and turmoil and confusion. Not in times of peace and prosperity. Anyway, we certainly have known a lot of hardship and turmoil and confusion in the last few years. And I don't see it letting up anytime soon. So fasten your seatbelt and please keep your hands inside of the car at all times. Please sign this waiver that says if you're accidentally decapitated on the ride, your people can't turn around and sue us. The amusement park don't need lawsuits. So, yeah. Please wear all safety harnesses. Keep your hands in the car at all times. And don't hold us to account when the whole thing goes pear-shaped and you lose a limb or you get killed or whatever. All right. Buckle up. We'll see you later.